Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. How is everyone? Good. Good. Fantastic. I want to start off by saying that has anyone ever noticed that if a door is opened equal to or greater than 45 degrees, it's universally agreed that you need to acknowledge the person opening said door with some well-mannered thanks, which is okay, which is fine. But if you repeat that process several times in the same corridor, within the same time and the same door frames, then you've inadvertently entered yourself into your very own word-based game. And that's one that usually makes my mind draw a blank. And that's how many synonyms or phrases can replace the word thanks. As I simply couldn't repeat the same word, as I fear that may be primitive. I simply couldn't live with the fact of anyone thinking my lexicon may be limited. And this recently happened to me in my local doctor's surgery, my being there in the hope of obtaining a prescription, as I'd recently succumbed to the pitfalls of Googling my own symptoms. The receptionist was sat under one of those 60-watt panel lights, told me that the waiting room is at the end of the hallway on the right. I let someone go before me, as that seemed the politest behaviour, and she held the door open in order to return the favour. I said thanks, as that seemed the most straightforward, doing my best to avoid any form of eye contact, as that, would be awkward. Each door in this corridor was separated by roughly 20 feet, and these are the amount of steps I take until once again we meet. She opens the door almost habitually. And I panic. I'm trying to mask my nervousness by nonchalantly saying, tip of the hat to you, Squire. Which, in hindsight, was a pretty dire attempt that left her looking confused, as if she'd have to travel back to the Middle Ages to when that term was last used. We then get to the third door, and the time in which I had to speak drew near. I could see by her facial expression she wanted a response. That part was clear. But what I now had to say, I wasn't too sure. I wasn't up to speed with the nomenclature, so I delved deep within the near limitless menagerie of the English language, roaming amongst its twists and turns in the hope of foraging a perfectly crafted word, one that was both intelligent and witty, something within this sack of organ and bone that would harvest an ounce of creativity until a flicker of consonants and vowels manifested in the pit of my bowels and meshed together to create a word, one of which she'd never heard. And given the green light from my consciousness, rose like a salmon through my esophagus. It had the buoyancy that made it ascend without question. I was almost 100% sure it wasn't indigestion. And from my throat this word was confidently flung, and I spoke with a flourish as I wielded my tongue. And in an attempt to redeem this prior faux pas, I said the word ta. The feeblest of spells, until I realised that she was opening that door for me as well. I explained, I thought I was in some kind of a lift in order to create a paradigm shift, but the shoddy foundations in my story began to show when she said, yeah, how many lifts do you think they're going to be in a converted Victorian bungalow? I said I didn't know. I couldn't possibly harbor a guess, and blamed on a lack of funding on the NHS. She left, walking down the hall after making me feel about 2 feet tall. I decided I couldn't take this anymore and made a sharp left across the nylon floor, and looking both ways so no one would know, made my escape through a nearby window, stepping over the ledge. Wading through a nearby hedge amidst the briar and the bramble that ensured I ambled from the scene in which I bemoaned my lack of cognitive ability. It was, however, incomparable to the prior exchange, and what it left of my now dwindling dignity. Thank you. All of my courage within to send this ball back to its place of origin. I made it with relative ease, but for some reason, upon the point of impact, the ball ran off from a ridiculously obscure angle. It was meant to go north, it went due west, it landed in the middle. Bloody River X. My efforts fell a little short of their reasonable asking price. My nan without a cup of tea with that particular slice. Needless to say, I had a pretty good cardio workout on that overcast day, as when they looked at me with utter dismay, I turned and, ran away. And that is more than I'd ever be able to manage. So now I just sit indoors with the curtains drawn and have a fish finger sandwich.